It's important for us to know our history. And Oakland is full of history of not just white Atlanta, but African American Atlantans, and Georgia too. It means something to me. African American history and the contribution of Africans in this country matters to me. The African American grounds, being a part of Oakland Cemetery, needs to be restored like the rest of Oakland Cemetery, and it needs to be maintained and cherished. And there's a lot there, a lot of work to be done.
So the 1866 African American Historical Burial Ground is 3.5 acres we know now, and we don't know how many people are buried there, but I suspect thousands. The burial records show that there are 12,000, I think 354, something like that.
Like that movie Hidden Figures, we're beginning to see all these African Americans that made all these contributions that we just didn't know about. And you spend a day in the African American grounds, and you can learn a lot about what it is to be an African American and therefore who you are.
One of the women who I recovered was buried in Potter's Field. And at one time she had a marker, and this was described in a newspaper article about Potter's Field here at Oakland. And so this marker would have been around in the early 20th century, but has since degraded. I'm not sure if it was made out of stone or what, but it described a woman named Celia who worked for Mrs. Joseph Brown. Now, Mrs. Joseph Brown was the wife of the Civil War governor, Joseph Brown, and her name was on the marker along with the dates for Celia. I had to go to Oakland's original burial records to find Celia's last name, because Celia's last name was not included on the marker. But it indicated that, the marker did indicate that she worked for Mrs. Joseph Brown and was a faithful servant for her. So that's the kind of history that gives us an idea of how the races interacted at that time, how women like Celia Davis were looked upon by their employers well enough to produce a marker for her, not enough to actually give her a name. So she was not named, she was named in the burial records, but she was not named on her marker. She was only given the first name, and I'm sure that's what they called her. She was their mammy, and that was the way they thought of her. She did not have a life other than that, and certainly no surname. And so people like Celia Davis, that's why I do the research that I do here at Oakland, to recover people who might not otherwise be remembered. So we do have a lot of notable people who are buried in the African American grounds at Oakland, but we have everyday folks as well.
The African American grounds has only had minor repair work done in the past 100 years. There's never been a widespread or large-scale restoration of this area. So a lot of what we see is monuments that have fallen or are broken. A lot of the walls have crumbled or are leaning to the point where they may fall soon.
Certainly there's been a historical injustice that, there's some redress involved as part of this. People who have not been properly respected, and their burial place not properly respected, and that just on its own terms should be corrected.
And over the next roughly 3 years, Preservation, Restoration, and Operations team will be restoring the walls, the walkways, and many different monuments of different materials.
Money in the past has tended to go to preservation of, the people who are in charge of things, let's just say. That's where the money has tended to go. And I think we've reached the point in our country and in our culture where that doesn't have to be the case anymore. We need to look back and document the things that we didn't document properly as time went by. And so I'm hopeful that in the spirit of unity, which our country very much needs, that other folks would decide to get involved, and let's work together and let's have fun at it. I mean, let's don't do it like, oh, this is a burden that we bear. Exactly. This is a common heritage and history that we share. And I say, let's work together and celebrate that.
The majority of African Americans who are buried here don't have burial spaces that are documented, where we don't actually have a location.
In June of 2016, Bigman Geophysical came and did a ground penetrating radar survey of the African American grounds. What they discovered is there's potentially over 800 unmarked burials. They marked all of these with metal pins and flags so that we could identify them later.
When they put all those little orange flags on the corner of each one of those sites, and you looked out on that field and you saw those orange flags, I mean, you'd have to have a heart of stone not to have been moved almost to tears by seeing that. And so that's just on an emotional level. I think people can connect with what's being done.
And I'm proud of Oakland for taking this on. And I do want to say that I hope that it's not just black people that are going to be contributing to this, it's white people too. Because I think like black should contribute to the Jewish section, and I just believe in everybody making sure that the history of this state and of this city is heard in all the little different sections, because we're really all one.